You're listening to LA40 with Katerina Cozias, only on LA Talk Radio.
Whoop, whoop, Los Angeles. We are back. And actually, we are back internationally because why? Well, we are streaming digitally on LA Talk Radio and TV's platform. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Katerina Cozias, here on LA40. It is Thursday, a little past the hour, and we have an exciting episode for you today. I am joined by a very special guest sitting right here to my left, whom you are going to want to stay tuned to listen to. Because trust me, when I tell you that there are so many people out there looking and seeking for that brass ring of fulfillment in order to really gain that charity of life and pleasure and aliveness that I always talk about, that sparkle behind the eyes. Mr. Wyatt McCain is one of the top 10 strategic mastery level mentors in the world. Tony Robbins, Chloe Madonis trained, and a mentor to some of the biggest stars in Beverly Hills. Mr. Wyatt McCain, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for your invitation.
I am very excited because we have titled this segment, Change Your Blueprints, Change Your Life. And I've already had a few people reach out to me and say, well, what do you mean by changing my blueprints? Are you talking building a home? What are you talking about? And I thought, well, that question is best posed to you, sir.
Well, actually, we do have these blueprints inside our subconscious mind. In fact, each of you watching me now, you have a minimum of 4 people living inside you, and I'm not referring to the great Carl Jung's 4 archetypes. You've got the adult you are now, the little child you once were at various stages of development, and of course you have each of your role models in there. And what ends up occurring, especially when our nervous system is young and vulnerable, is that those traumatic events that you experience with your emotions interwoven with your human senses of what the person looked like, what perhaps the cologne or perfume, if it's a lady, they were wearing, and also the sounds. And all of this gets imprinted and literally whacks out the strings of your nervous system.
Mm-hmm. So we take those childhood experiences really and we carry them through into adulthood, and we are operating with not even recognizing subconsciously a lot of what we're holding with respect to what? To fear, to anxiety, to depression. How does this affect us if we're not addressing it? And why should we address it?
Sure. Well, let's look at the first part of your question.
And excuse me, because I have a cold, so yes.
So what happens when we go through these experiences in life is that we make these key decisions. And why would we make a key decision? Well, every single day, every one of you in your conscious mind are continually asking throughout your day and evening, what does this mean? What's happening right now? What does that mean? And your conscious mind goes for the answer into these blueprints that are down in your subconscious mind. Now, when these experiences happened, I'll give you a quick example. A little child, 1.5 years old, 2 years old, if something happens and the parents don't know what to do, well, I know this sounds kind of funny, but the fact is they sometimes panic, or they call a Marine Corps reconnaissance officer, or they call up their local psychologist because they don't know what to do for the child. However, by the time the child gets to be 3.5, 4, 5, 6 years old, the parent who's the most critical of the child is the one whose love the child will crave the most. And so what happens is that when the child realizes, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get my needs met any longer the way I need them met, then the child asks, okay, which parts of myself do I need to disown? What do I have to get rid of that's me in order to learn that toxic parent's language for relationships. So the child starts suffering because they become like the very person that's being abusive to them.
And in terms of talking abusive, we're not necessarily speaking physically abusive, but we are speaking even emotionally. So if you have one parent that might be stricter than another one, or one parent that tells you, you're not achieving what I think you should be achieving, that sort of thing.
Well, I'll use my own life because I know it so well as an example. Although both of my parents, rest their souls, were very aggressive, very controlling, and by the way, control is an illusion for a pretend life. There really is no certainty. And I'll just tell
about that, yeah.
I'll just tell you all flat out now that life's really about learning how to navigate the uncertainties of life. And when you embrace the obstacles which contain your lessons and apply what you've learned, then your choices are free because you're no longer needing other people's approval. You don't need people to like you. If they do, that's the bonus in life. And in so doing, you have the freedom to redirect your destiny. However, if your nervous system is young and vulnerable and you're a child, then I know in my own life, mother would go into these tirades for like 45 minutes to an hour and tell me all the things she was going to do. And then she went to the closet where my dad's belts were, got the biggest buckle. But before she beat me to a bloody pulp, or she would say within an inch of my life, she had to let me know that all these really painful things that she accused me of. And all I could think of was, please stop beating me, And
so how did that affect your life afterwards? Because part of
Sure.
what we do on the show here is talk about, living life to the fullest, living your dreams, living your potential. How does something like that, as a child, do you then, as you had mentioned earlier, you almost shut a part of yourself off so that you can deal with that emotion? But what does that mean 25, 35, 45 years later?
Well, you end up living your life in what's called learned helplessness, where your situation is persistent, you discover it's pervasive, and when you make the decision, oh gosh, like this is permanent, and you believe everything you're told, like I know in my own case, I volunteered. I mean, sure, I'll be the black sheep in the family. Some attention's better than no attention, because after all, I don't matter, and I'm just a burden to these two people who say they love me. So you end up using the weapons used against you. You learn them, and every time you use them around other people, you re-experience your childhood traumas, pain. You don't get well. So we're not talking about you screwed up on a test and got a B+, and you don't get dessert for a week. I'm talking about real violence. And then the other emotional scars from dad, the contempt of boys, and I don't want to go into, that place of what it sounded like. So this may seem like a watered down Jack Daniels to you folks. However, I want to emphasize to you that when someone repeatedly tells you that when you were born and they were giving out brains, you were on a slow boat to China, and all kinds of things. And so what happened was, in my generation, women stayed home and they raised citizens. They raised their families.
You're talking to the mic.
Yeah, and so mother became the husband in the marriage. And there was something that's called a cross-generational coalition I want your listeners to know about briefly. And that's when one of your role models will use one of the children against their spouse. So then you become, as I did, the surrogate husband to my mom, so that she could get me to fulfill her own unmet childhood needs.
And so the cycle goes.
Exactly. And then may I say something else here?
Yes, of course. Just talking to the mic.
Okay.
Sorry. I love you, Wyatt, because you're nice and animated like I am.
Yeah.
We just got to remember to talk into the mic.
Okay. Thank you for that. So there's something called a double bind, and it's insidious. Back in 1956, several clinical psychologists got together And one of the people, not a clinical psychologist, but extremely gifted like myself, and when I say that, I want to emphasize that my skill sets now, I started developing when I was 3.5 years old, because long before preschool, I had to be able to tell what mood swing mom was in so I knew whether it was safe to walk into the house. So back in 1956, all these people got together, and the question they asked was, what type of a behavior pattern would a schizophrenic find normal? And it's called the double bind. So you're really damned if you do and damned if you don't. So if you folks can see right now my hands, I've got the back side of the left hand, these fingers cupped with the other side, and if you start pulling like isometrics, keep doing it, you're going to start to feel the tension in your forearms, in your arms, your biceps, your triceps, your chest, the pectoralis major muscles. Well, imagine that that's happening to the seams of your nervous system. So what is a double bind? You've got two messages, and they're incongruent to one another. So when you're loyal to one message from, it could be the same parent or the other or their spouse, suddenly you're disloyal to the other message. So now the child just throws up their hands and goes, no matter what I do, I'm always wrong. I must be a screw up. They're just telling me that because they love me. And then you get all these behavioral problems. By the 4th grade, I'd been in 10 elementary schools. Expelled from, 2 or 3 and suspended from the rest. And then, I mean, even the nuns wouldn't take me, you know. But, you know, that's another story unto itself.
So how do you then suggest that people move out of that? What did you do to move through that double-bindedness and the emotional turmoil that you were developing to become a healthy, functioning, and super successful adult later in life? How can people move through that if they're feeling stuck and not even recognizing why they might be stuck?
Great question. Well, first of all, as a child, you can't leave the field because you're dependent on these people. And because I was the most sensitive and intuitive child in the family, I became the barometer for the health of the marriage, which was really obviously whacked out. And so I became frozen and locked. And as a result, when I was 6.5, not quite 7 years old, I went outside and I looked at the smoggy sky. And this is really profound when I look back on this from all these decades later, of course. I looked up at the sky and I asked myself this question, which was, how am I going to make it for another 10 or 11 years till I can get the hell out of here? And then shortly thereafter, I made another profound decision, which stayed in my life until just a few months ago. And that decision was, I am never getting married, never having a family. I am not going to recreate this hell again.
Wow.
The only thing is that it wasn't until I was out a couple of years ago, you know, my early morning 2-hour power, you know, to see the sunrise that I would do every morning. And suddenly it dawned on me, holy shit, I haven't divorced myself from my dad and mom's marriage. I'm still stuck in it and didn't know it.
Decades later.
Decades later. So,
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I might add quickly is that when parents are acting like idiots and a child can literally create a problem just to attempt to get the parents to stop fighting with each other because the child doesn't want the parents to go through a divorce, and mother would be threatening that every now and then. So, and then another quick thing I want to mention is that the child can take on the emotional pain of one or both of the parents. And if you're a kid, and I want everybody to know that I made childhood a whole lot worse. So people used to say to me decades ago, well, how could you know? You're just a child, this and that. And what I came to realize was I knew what I was doing. There were times when I wanted to get even. You know, Dad would lock me in the bedroom and it was pitch black. I mean, you know, your eyes adjust, you still couldn't see an outline of anything. There was no night light or anything like that. And I would sit up in bed just to be stubborn and be defiant, because the only thing I could do was to be obstinate.
And that was, you were being obstinate in order to get their attention so that you could feel some sort of love from them?
That's a great question.
Is that where the behavior gets triggered?
I didn't want them to win. And what I realized in retrospect, because, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking is always 20/20 hindsight, is that by doing that, all I did was hurt myself.
So how many people out there are living their own version of this, whether it's as traumatic a childhood as you had or not? How do we then access those blueprints? How did you go in and start to recognize what was under the surface? Any tips for some people who maybe not even aware that they're carrying some of that trauma still?
Sure.
Can we change our blueprints? First question number one. And if so, what can we do to start moving through that childhood dilemma?
Well, that's a great question. And here's the answer for all of your viewers. Here's what I do with all my celebrity clients. First of all, I vet them very carefully, because I'm sure if you haven't done this, some of you know of people who go out and invest a lot of money and then they don't give their all. They don't play full out, all out. And one of the ways I continually get better at what I do, and it used to be like by the month, then by the week, now it's by the hour. And what I mean by that is that I won't work with someone who won't put in the most important skin in the game. And that skin in the game is their hunger. If they don't have a hunger that will pull them out of this learned helplessness where they're stuck, where they're literally missing in action in solitary confinement, because your emotions are stored in your physiology. Your subconscious mind is your physiology. And we humans have developed over 3 to 4 million years the ability to not only observe our thoughts and our emotions, we can also, our subconscious mind, some people call it a soul, some people call it a spirit. I don't care what you call the thing, it exists. And we have the ability for our subconscious mind to step out of our body. It's perfectly safe. By the way, I was doing this at 3.5 years old, and I didn't know it was called an out-of-body experience. I just knew, because you asked me earlier, how did I get away from all this to find some little tiny semblance
piece of safety,
of sanity, peace and safety. So I'd leave my body, and I would hover. And I had no fear, because it was an adventure. And so you have the ability, if you're shown this, and I do this with all my clients, that you can step outside your body. It's called triple dissociation.
Okay.
And you can literally watch yourself in human form. I'm doing it right now. As my conscious mind is observing my thoughts and feelings. So when you step outside, when your subconscious mind steps outside your body, suddenly you're in absolute detachment, absolute peace, and absolute freedom and power. So you can focus, and sometimes this happens like you get in a bad car wreck, and suddenly your movements are so definitive that you think everything's unfolding in slow motion.
Time has slowed, right?
Yeah, actually, it's because the rest of the time in your day, each day, you're going way too fast. And one of the interesting things about going too fast is when we look for distractions. Pardon me.
Hello, social media.
And so yes.
Right.
Correctamundo. And so here's what happens with human beings. You know, animals really can teach us a lot if we reframe and give a different meaning to what we're seeing. And so just as you go into an art gallery, they choose a frame, say, around a Remington or a Renoir or a George O'Keeffe watercolor. And they choose a certain style of wood, and it's stained a certain way, and sometimes some of the colors in the painting are in the frame. So the frame is part of your perception, of course, of what you're looking at.
The entire picture.
Now,
right.
correct. So if you change the frame, then your perception of the painting changes as well. If you give a different frame, which is a meaning to the people that brutalized you, then suddenly a healing occurs. Now, I want to mention one other thing before I...
Sure.
Well, I'll just go with the... So what I do is that when I have someone who has the absolute hunger to grow, to heal, then I take them on a guided imagery which I created, and I ask them to sit in. Do you want the details?
Yeah, I'm imagining that you're taking them back.
Okay.
Yeah, no, keep talking.
Okay. So what I do with these people is I first have them stretch and make certain that they get as much oxygen as they can. I say it in an acute way, and I say, now I want every single one of your alveoli in the deep recesses of your lungs to be nourished with this oxygen. And then I have them close their eyes and do a special breathing, which MIT did a lot of extensive studies on, and they discovered that this type of breathing alters brainwave patterns.
I was going to say, it starts to affect your physiology, right?
Correct. Oh, absolutely. And after all, your emotions are stored in your physiology, and every emotion is interwoven with the opposite. So without fear, you wouldn't find your courage. Without despair, you wouldn't find your joy. Without hate, you wouldn't find your love. So on the seesaw of life, it's never all 100% of either opposite emotion. There's always a little bit. When you're up in the air, you folks can see my makeshift seesaw. If you're up here, it's not 100% love, it's not 100% courage, it's not 100% joy. So it's not, say, the color white, it's really light silver. And when you're down in the dumps, it's not black, because it's not all fear, it's not all despair, and it's not all hate.
It's really just a dark gray.
It's a dark charcoal gray, so there's a little bit of the opposite. So the balance point on the seesaw of life is developing the ability to transform those blueprints. And so now I'm going to explain what I do with these people in detail. And by the way, what I'm explaining is not some conceptualization where you're going to play this over and over and then do it with yourself. You need to be taken back in time. So I ask the person to do this special type of breathing, where they breathe in 4 inhalations through their nose. They hold to a count of 4 and exhale through their mouth. And with each breath in, there's a synchronicity where the thumb, to complete the electrical circuit, touches each finger of their hand. So the first breath in and the last breath out, you're at the index finger. And then forefinger, ring finger, smallest finger, and back. And then when I usually do like 3, 4, 5 sets, because I'm listening to the person's breathing. I'm listening to them relaxing. This is so crucial. Because if their body's not relaxed, then gaining entrance to their subconscious mind becomes only more difficult. And whatever a person resists, they make stronger. And so a person can go make all kinds of money.
Right.
However, if making the money is a resistance, say, to the fact that they had a family member who grew up in utter poverty, then the child, though given everything, can very well be carrying the shameful emotions of what the parent went through when the parent was growing up.
But I'd like to piggyback on that, because
Sure.
as you're growing up, going back to your seesaw example, people have the ability to take a situation, a factual situation that happened, and determine in the now how they want to reframe that, going back to
right
reframing, right? To reframe that, and they can see that same situation. They can choose to now see it as a positive experience.
Yes.
Or they can choose to continue to see it as the negative.
That's
the problem when they see it as the negative is that they are living that negative past in the present. So as
Absolutely.
human beings, why would we not try to go out of our way to reframe everything so that our now is better? But that's where I find people get stuck, you see.
Yes. So I'll explain.
Well, we don't have time for a full explanation.
How about if I go fast?
No. Well, what I want to do is I want
No.
to tease people with wanting to talk to Wyatt in person, and he's going to be gracious enough to tell us in a little bit how to do that, because I don't want you to give away the entire regression.
Okay.
The details of the regression, I think we need to keep people in a little bit of mystery, and I would really recommend that you do reach out to Wyatt if you're looking for more of this. But what I'd like you to touch on is the importance of what that exercise accomplishes.
It accomplishes a healing, because when I take someone into the heart, let's just say, like what I did with a client early this morning, this woman went through some really horrendous experiences when she was 5 years old. So by knowing which parent was the most critical, I know that's the person whose love she craved the most. So in this scenario, I had her go back in time, and I walked her back by going through the pages of this imaginary book called My Life Story. And with her eyes closed and in a relaxed state, what ended up happening was that I took her to see that parent, in this case it was her father, to see him as he looked as a younger man. And there she is in the scene of whatever happened in the kitchen of their home when she was 5 years old. So now I have the adult woman step into the scene to protect the young child. And then I have them step into the heart of the dad, seeing him as he looked then, and then sharing with me what he was experiencing in his emotions during the abuse. And of course, what happens is, for her to be able to tell me that, she's in her own heart, which allows the healing to flow through her.
And she is also in that position now as an adult,
Yes.
not as that 5-year-old child.
Correct. And what she's doing is beginning to reparent that 5-year-old that whose development was stopped, who's still living inside of her. And so once she shares with me everything that that parent was feeling then based upon what she's told me and her particular situation, I intuitively ask her to repeat after me whatever comes up for me and communicate it to the dad as he looked then, so that what is so traumatic for her can now be completed and have a real healing, and with it a forgiveness as well.
And with that forgiveness, I don't know the age of this woman, let's say she's 53.
Okay.
With that forgiveness, what does this now open up in her?
Great question. So what it does is it creates a transformation of those stacked experiences on top of another that are held in place by these negative anchors. And what you see, you don't get rid of what's negative because it creates a vacuum and then it floods right back in.
Oh, the negative keeps coming.
Correctamundo. So by going through this guided imagery, and then by being able to say to that parent, I want you to know, Dad, this is one of the things I had her say. I'm not giving it all away.
Okay.
I said to her, now I want you to tell your dad the following, and repeat after me out loud. Dad, I want you to know that I know that you were an angel who was sent to me to act the way you did because you knew that one day I would grow up to be an adult woman and that I would be driven deeper within my inner strength, where I would then begin to discover and really rediscover that I'm more than enough for everything that life will serve up for me. Now, that reframing of the meaning allows the beginning of the transformation of those negative anchors that are stacked thousands of times since she was 5 years old, and they're transforming and being replaced by positive ones. And that's how you deal with the blueprints. And as a result, now when her conscious mind asks what something means and she goes to these positive blueprints, suddenly what's congruent is a new life for her that's about what she went through as a gift, and now she gets to enjoy the gift and no longer be fearful of her success because she doesn't have to play it safe. She can take the kinds of risks that allow her to blossom more like roses that have been pruned properly.
And that is what keeps a lot of people stuck, is their inability to believe in self.
Yeah.
And I know with a lot of the mentoring that I do with my media clients and the Media Mindset Mastery program, we work through how do you step into your confidence, your belief in self. And many times you can't get there without some sort of professional mentorship and training and coaching. Mr. McCain, we are out of time, but I am really excited to announce
Yes, please.
our latest exciting news, which is because Wyatt and I both recognize the importance of getting out of your own way effectively, getting out of your own shadow, understanding what it is that has been holding you back from really catapulting to where you could be, where you know you could be, where something inside you is telling you you want to be pulled towards. We will be teaming up and we will be holding, starting very soon, October 30th will be our first one, exclusive for anyone local to Los Angeles, a VIP mentorship day where we will be going strategically into details on how to really craft your best life. So, sir, talk a little bit more about our event. We are going to be doing this jointly, and it's going to be called Change Your Blueprints, Change Your Life.
Yep.
Give us a synopsis of what people can expect that day.
You can expect a major healing before you leave. Expectations only happen, of course, when you do your part. So that's what's so important. The most important thing I want you to bring, let's see, it's what we say, a $500 value for $129. I mean, that's nothing. You know, you fill up your gas tank, it's about $129. And the fact is, it's never about money. Money is never an issue why people do something. People only haggle about money when they devalue themselves. If they don't value themselves, then they make money the issue. And the truth really be known is that if you bring that hunger to the event, you're going to experience the kind of healing that, quite frankly, have you ever just once in your life, like maybe more than once, you find yourself acting inappropriately, and then you have this little, like the light showed through, the door cracked a half an inch, and you thought to yourself, I can't believe I'm acting this way again. But you don't know how not to. We're going to teach you the skill set to be able to do that, to interrupt your patterns, to begin the kind of transformation. And I want to add something. It's not a light switch moment. It's called neuro-associative conditioning. If you've got a beautiful string instrument and you don't tune it regularly, no matter how talented you are in playing, say, that piano or that
guitar,
or
sure,
the violin.
The violin,
the longer you wait to retune it, then you've got to recondition those strings, because before the person leaves who retuned it, he takes the tuning fork and shows you the first strings from an hour earlier when he got there. They're already starting to go back to where they were. But the good news is that this isn't about being the chiropractor of what I do, because this isn't a job, it's not a career, it's a mission, and the mission's my life. And if you make your mission your life, then before you leave, you'll have the tools and the follow-up from me and Katerina to launch you in a whole different direction for the destiny you've always wanted. And one last thing very quickly. I don't think I mentioned this. I learned from a orthopedic surgeon almost half a century ago. He showed me these x-rays of a woman's badly fractured right leg. And he said, you know, Wyatt, there's this other fracture a couple inches away and it didn't set and heal properly. I got to refracture that as well. But when everything heals properly, each point of fracture, the bone will be stronger than it was before it ever broke. And that's also true for those spiritual wounds that you've been carrying around for far too long.
And we are out of time. We are far too long. We've got so much to talk about. It's so much going on. Mr. Wyatt McCain, you have been trained by the best of the best. You now train and mentor the best of the best.
Yeah.
And we are inviting you, if you are local to the Southern California area, and even if you're not, and you would like to join us for the one-day exclusive event, we will be announcing the details. Do mark the date, October 30th, here in Los Angeles. Special location, VIP session. It is exclusive, and it is going to fill up, and it is going to be a tight, impactful day. So more from us on that. Before we leave, Mr. McCain, if people want to reach out to you personally, how can they do that?
They can find me on Facebook. McCain is spelled MC capital C like Charlie, AIN like November. Same spelling as one of our most patriotic Americans, John McCain's last name. And of course, Wyatt, just think of Wyatt Earp. You can find me on Facebook, and you can read all my articles, watch the testimonials, and
reach out to you on Facebook Messenger if somebody is really eager to learn more. I would suggest that if you are sitting in a space where you know that you may be harboring some of this childhood trauma and you just don't know how to get rid of it so that you can, as I mentioned, get out of your own way and live your best life, don't hesitate to hit up Wyatt. Sir, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
I look so forward to coupling with you. We will be holding these events every couple of months because it is imperative, and there's a lot of work that I've done personally on my own journey to personal transformation and development has been absolutely instrumental. My work with Wyatt himself, the work that we're now going to be jointly doing together. So lots coming down the pipe. Please keep an eye out on both of our pages for all of that. If you're tuning in from Facebook, thank you for muddling your life with social media. It allows us to connect. If you're streaming with us on LA Talk Radio, well, thank you for always being a special fan. And if you're catching us on iTunes, excellent. That means you are in the Apple world. And we have to say a big, big thank you to the visionaries like Mr. Steve Jobs for their long-term hit it out of the Milky Way. If you want to hit it out of the Milky Way, stay tuned with us because we've got a lot going on.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us. Katerina Cozias, Mr. Wyatt McCain. We'll see you next week.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
You're listening to LA40 with Katerina Cozias, only on LA Talk Radio.